Welcome to a very special edition of the ODPH podcast. My name is Ken M. You know me as the host of the ODPH, but I'm also Nerd Initiative's comics editor-in-chief. And for this special occasion, we have a special co-host, but you know him if you're checking out Turn a Page every Tuesday night, Eastern Standard Time on Nerd Initiative YouTube. And if you know the show, you know I don't even try doing his intro. I let him take it away.
Coming at you live and direct from the sanctum of awesome. 'Tis I, off the cuff Tom, Nerd Initiative's pop culture connoisseur. Ken, always a pleasure.
Absolutely. And you know, when we do these special editions, we have a comic that we are completely excited about, and one that we feel that you need to make sure you have not one, not two, but 3 copies at least in your collection. Because if you are a comics fan right now and you have not checked out what is going on via Skybound Entertainment and the Energon universe, you're truly missing out. Since debuting in the pages of Void Rivals, the excitement has been building for the return to comic shelves of the Transformers and G.I. Joe properties. And we've been lucky to have a fantastic companion series come our way via Daniel Warren Johnson's Transformers. And spiraling out of the pages of Transformers #2 is leading into a series that is going to be coming out December 27th with art by Tom Reilly and Jordie Bellaire. And it is a series that is going to definitely have fans excited for the expansion of the Energon universe. If you're at the New York Comic Con panel like myself, you left there going, when is this coming out? Take my money now. Yes. And we are so fortunate enough to have the writer behind this book on the show today. You know his work from such books as Dark Ride from Skybound Entertainment, and also Superman and Batman and Robin. So he is very familiar with the land of superheroes. But let's face it, we're here to talk about the John Cena of the real American heroes, and that is Duke. Please welcome to the show the one and only Joshua Williamson. Josh, thanks so much for taking the time out to talk to us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And, also thank you for busting out John Cena as Duke, because I 100% agree with that assessment. With John Cena, when I was watching Bumblebee, the whole time I was watching, he got the scar on his face and everything. And I was like, yo, this is just Duke. I wish they just called him Duke. Just said at the ending, like, oh, that's a code name. If they had just said at the end of the movie, oh, this, whatever his name is in the movie, I can't remember what it is. They're like, oh, that's just a code name. His real name is Conrad. I would have lost my mind. Like, and I think that's, if we get to this in the future and that they go that direction, I mean, he's perfect casting. He is Duke, dude. Like, you watch that movie and you're like, this is Duke.
He was Agent Burns. Agent Burns.
Is that what it was? Yeah, that's a code name. His name's Conrad.
Yeah, he's so Duke. It's not even funny. And I mean, obviously, seeing how the resurgence of the Energon universe is kind of really taken a big imprint in comics. How did you get involved with this? And I mean, how was the idea pitched for you to come aboard and start getting involved in the G.I. Joe side of things?
It's funny. I had been thinking about G.I. Joe for a long time. I was like a big G.I. Joe fan, and ever since I was a kid. And it was one of those things where, so every project I have a notebook for it. So it's like I have a Superman notebook, a Batman and Robin notebook, whatever. And I have a notebook that I had made just for G.I. Joe ideas. That was just stuff I was thinking about. And for a really long time, I knew that Robert was a huge Transformers fan. Like, and I knew he had like this crazy Transformers collection of toys, and it was something that he really loved. Sean Makowitz, who worked for Skybound, he's the publisher. He and I were talking one day, and he was like, "Oh, if there were any licensed books, would you ever be interested in doing any more licensed stuff?" And I was like, "I have sworn off licensed book. I'm done with licensed books. It will never happen, except for this small handful." It's like, yeah. I was like, G.I. Joe is one I would potentially do. And he was like, that's interesting. We've been talking. And he told me this thing. He was like, Robert has this idea. He was like, I probably shouldn't be telling you. Robert has this idea. He's like, what if Robert had a comic book come out, and the last page, like totally unrelated, the last page, there was a Transformer. And I was like, you keep it a secret? You're not going to tell anybody? And he's like, no. And I'm like, that's amazing. I love this idea. I was like, you should 100% do that. That was so long ago. Like, that conversation with Sean, I couldn't even tell you. It was probably like 6 years ago. It was a long time ago. And like before my son was born, and my son is running around like a crazy person, so it's like, it was a while back. And we kept talking about it, but here's the funny thing. Every time Robert had a new book come out, I was like, yo, there's gonna be a Transformer at the end. Like, every time I was like, yo, it's Transformer at the end, Transformer at the end.
Just waiting for it, like, where?
Just waiting for it. So, Sean reached out, and he was like, I think we're gonna get it. It's a secret. I think we're gonna get the license. Would you still be interested? And I was like, well, it depends on some factors, depends on some things. But then we just started talking, and then in the process of talking about it, I found out that Robert is also a huge G.I. Joe fan, and that was part of it. He was like, no, I want to do both. I don't want to do them together. And he had some thoughts, and we just started talking about it. And it was funny because I think those early conversations, it wasn't real. It was just having, it's like
Yeah.
you and your buddies talking about what would you do if you could, right? Like that's kind of where we were. And we started just jamming ideas and throwing stuff around. And I had this notebook full of ideas already and things I was thinking about. And when I started giving that over to them and talking to them about it, we were all on the same page for a lot of things. There was little bits and pieces that it was like there's bigger planning going on, and obviously Void Rivals wasn't a thing yet at that time. But then Robert started working on that piece of it, and then I started working on my piece, and then it just became real very quickly. And yeah, it was a long process. Like Skybound's been working on this for a long time, and even with some of the stuff that we're doing now, some of the outlines and stuff, I wrote a long time ago, at least, yeah, maybe 2 years ago. I mean, it's crazy some of the conversations we have about this stuff. So, it was a long process, but it was definitely a very fun process. But that's how I got involved. It was just, like I've known Skybound for a while, done a few books with them, and I have a good relationship with them. So I was talking to Sean, and he was just, would you ever do another licensed book? That's really what it came down to. And I was like, yeah. Well, for them, like, no, but one. and the one he wanted just happened to be that one.
Well, especially too, I mean, with one that's had such the fandom as, Transformers and G.I. Joe, I mean, they've been such staples through pop culture for decades now. And I mean, obviously, growing up, I mean, I'm sure you had to be a big fan of that. Like, what would you say is your favorite G.I. Joe moment growing up?
Oh, this is tough because I feel like I might start giving stuff away. Because
Okay. I'm sorry. Yeah.
No, it's okay. It's all right. It's all right. It's all right. The thing is that like there's a lot of stuff I love in there, and there's stuff that I love that is like some of the weirder stuff. It's like when I started looking at doing this with any project I work on, I have to be obsessed with it. Like that's the truth. I have to be obsessed with it a little bit, but also I have to take all those pieces that I love and put them in it. So it's like a lot of stuff we're doing because we're starting at the beginning and we're doing an origin story for it. It's like me going and finding those things that I loved, I was able to put in there. But I can give you a few things that I love, right? It's like I love the episode of the cartoon where Shipwreck is in that town and he starts freaking out, everybody's melting. Like that's a traumatizing thing for a kid, That's one of my favorite things. I think about that all the time. It's one of my favorite like horror moments, not just a G.I. Joe moment. One of my favorite episodes of the cartoon is the Game Master.
Okay.
I love that episode. It's the weirdest. It is the weirdest episode. I feel like it's arguably the weirdest episode, right? Like, I think
it's up there. It's up there with the Wiper. Yeah.
Dude, oh yeah. Oh man, the Wiper. Oh my god, the Wiper episode always drives me crazy because it's like, especially on a rewatch. I will tell you, like, listen, on a rewatch, I don't want to. I will skip. I will skip the Wiper episode. Like, I'll watch a little bit of it just because it's like, oh, cool, barbecue's here and it's kind of funny. But then you're like, no, I'm out. I can't do it. Like, I gotta stop. But the Game Master episode is one of the weirdest. That's the episode where I'm like, the boss was on vacation that week. That's my opinion.
Yes.
I'm like, the boss was on vacation, and everybody else was like, you know what I want to do? We're gonna have an episode where this dude who's a giant, for no reason, is gonna kidnap Flint, Lady J, Cobra Commander, and Baroness. Like, it's one of the funniest. I love watching that episode because it's just like, this is the weirdest thing, and the ending is super strange because they're all hanging out on that island together and they don't start fighting each other, like, and they're just chilling. It's the weirdest thing.
Yeah, but
obviously
the
comic, like, the issue 21 is great, obviously.
The silent issue, right?
Yeah, the silent issue. Yeah. One of my favorite. So here, I'm gonna rewind a little bit with my own history with G.I. Joe. So when I was a kid, I was really into the toys and the cartoon, right? And for me, the comic, when you're a little kid, I was kind of a snobby little kid, and I was like, oh, that comic is just an adaptation. That's just a tie. I don't read ties, right? And when I got to college, I was talking to a buddy of mine who worked at the comic store with me, and he was just like, hardcore. The comic is amazing. He was like, the G.I. Joe comic is great. He was like, it has nothing to do with the cartoon, nothing to do with the movie. It is its own thing. And when Devil's Due got the rights around the same time, I think Marvel started reprinting those like big collections of it that had the J. Scott Campbell covers. Yeah. And so I was like, all right, I'll get those. I'll start getting those. And I remember reading that first issue for the first time and being like, this is one of the best first issues I've ever read. I was like, holy crap, Larry Hama is a genius. Like this
Mhm.
is, and what's crazy about that first issue is how detailed and dense it is. It's a dense first issue, but all the pieces are there. Like it's almost like reading, this is a bad example maybe, but it's like reading a novel. You're just like, all these pieces are here. It's like when people talk about reading Game of Thrones, there's all these characters, all these pieces, all this politics, all this moving stuff that's going on, but at the same time it all works. Dude, that's like reading Larry Hama's G.I. Joe. Like you start reading it and you're just like, oh my God, this was next level. And then you start understanding, you're like, okay, now I know why this comic sold so much in the 80s. That's a big piece of it, because it was just a good comic book. But then you start realizing why people are super defensive about that book. Like you start being like,
Yeah.
oh no, this is not what you think it is. And so then I started reading that, and I actually did a read. So I read all of it then, and I started doing a reread when I got this job. And what was funny is when I got the job, one of the conversations I had with Skybound was actually about taking a step back on reading everything again, because I didn't want to mimic stuff. But also I knew, because
Mhm.
Larry Hama was going to come back with 301. The point wasn't to do what he did, what was do something new, and do something different. But I started looking at all the different G.I. Joe books that Devil's Due did, and then what was done at IDW, and I started realizing, I'm
Mhm.
like, oh, I actually read a lot of this. Like I really did. I kind of kept up with, especially in the issue ones. I was like, I feel like I read a lot of this, more so than I realized until I started going back through and going through it. But yeah, I think those are some of, like, G.I. Joe issue 3 is an amazing issue, and I say that hesitant because it's a bit of a spoiler about what I'm doing, because issue 3 has elements that are similar in some ways. Um, it has one of my favorite Joe characters. Well, it's funny. Like there was a Joe character that I liked, and then he wasn't in the outline. So when I wrote
Oh,
the
okay.
outline for GI Joe and Cobra, he wasn't there, and then I needed a character, and I was like, oh, this character kind of fits this role. And so I was like, I think I can use him. And then I went back and I reread a bunch of stuff with him, and you know, and he just fit so well. And then he became like a co-star of the book. He's on the first issue, but he became almost like a co-star of the book, and he's in issue 3 of Larry Hama's G.I. Joe. That's a bit of a spoiler for someone to go do research. Um, but yeah, dude, there's a lot of stuff I liked. Now, obviously, and Robert says this too. I think that the opening to the movie with the Cobra like theme is one of the best openings ever. Like that
Mhm.
whole opening is so dope. It's arguably probably the coolest GI Joe animated moment. Is just that opening of the movie with Cobra and how
Yeah.
it's the Empire State Building and everything. That whole thing. I mean, dude, there are times you just watch just that because you're just like, that is so fucking cool. Um, but yeah, and then dude, I buy a lot of the toys, so I have a lot of stuff. I have a lot of I guess favorites from GI Joe.
Neat
No, I
tidbit.
mean,
Did you know
I'll
that
go.
in the movie, it is the only time that the Navy gets any nod in the theme song?
No, that's it. The movie is a weird thing to me, because I was talking with someone about this the other day, where it's like, the term, the Mandela effect.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Dude, I believe, if you would ask me 5 years ago, I'll say 5 years ago. If you would ask me 5 years ago if I saw G.I. Joe the movie in the theaters, I would have said yes. I would, like, complete memory, saw it in the theaters. But now I know it was never released in the theaters.
No, it was cut up
But
as
in
a
my memory,
five-parter.
it was. So I'm always trying to figure this out. I'm like, am I from an alternate reality where it was in theaters? They actually,
Mhm.
they let it be released. It is funny when you watch that movie and you get to the ending and they yell that Duke is okay. It cracks up every time, because you're just like,
Yeah.
that last little dubbing in there is so funny. But no, I didn't know that. That's funny.
Yeah, and the only reason I know it because obviously I'm wearing the shirt today because we're talking about it. I'm a vet myself, so when it comes to Navy
Oh yeah.
stuff, that's my deal. But yeah, if you ever YouTube the two different theme songs, if you YouTube the original theme song versus the movie theme song, it's over land and air. No, it's over land and sea and air.
Dude, I'm writing this
G.I.
down.
Joe's there.
Yeah, my dad. I think part of where my fandom started with GI Joe, because I was into He-Man. The Transformers was funny. Like Transformers is one I watched, but I didn't buy as many toys because they were a little more expensive. I feel like in my memory, like I had a few.
No, you're right.
Um,
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Like I had all GI Joe stuff, except like Transformers. Like it was like a big deal, but it was always super expensive. You want to get like Optimus or Megatron.
Yeah,
that's it though. Well,
I got
dude,
Sea Spray and Beachcomber and Astro and like all the tiny
oh,
ones. I was
dude,
like,
I
yeah,
had
sure.
Astro. Yeah, I had Astro. But yeah, they're always. I remember. I feel like they're were a little bit more expensive. There was something I was going to say. Oh, well, so my dad. So I come from a military family, so it's like my grandpa was in World War II. He was actually in D-Day. My dad had made different jobs, but he was in like the Air Force and he was an FBI firearms trainer, and he had done different stuff, but always a military guy. He was in the NSA for a bit, so it's like for a significant amount of time. But he was overseas. He was in Iraq and Afghanistan, so it's like I think for my dad too, as a kid, being like, oh. GI Joes, I know what a GI Joe is. So my dad would buy me tons of GI Joes. I mean, I remember like I would Christmas Day open up boxes. It would be like just GI Joes, and he would always do
Oh,
the
that's
mail order
awesome.
stuff. I got a lot of the mail order GI Joes too. Like I definitely got, what do they call it? They call them now the Steel Brigade now. But
Mhm.
you would mail it in, and then they
Mhm.
would mail it back, and they would say that was you. It'd come with a little card with your name on it, but he had a mask on.
Yes, yes,
Uh,
I had one. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, me too. Yeah. So I think that stuff, we just had a lot of it. A lot of G.I. Joes in my house, man. Still to this day, it's funny. My son comes up here and I have all the classifieds, but I also have some of the HasLabs. So I have like the Striker and stuff here in my office,
Okay.
and my son will come in and he'll play with the Striker and he'll play with the different classified toys that I have on the ground over here.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, no, I had the William Refrigerator Perry figure. Like that's how deep I was going for the fandom.
So I didn't have that, but a friend of mine did. So we had a deal at one point. My buddy and I, we made this deal where basically we're like, we're not going to ask for the same figures. So that way we
Okay.
could basically all we had them all essentially. And so we would be like, I'm asking for this vehicle, so don't ask for that vehicle. Right. And so we would basically on Christmas, like the day after Christmas, we get together and be like, cool, now we can play because we had all of them. We had no duplicates. But he
That's so
had he
smart.
had the fridge. He had the fridge, yeah.
Yeah, like I say, those toys, I mean, that's just something you just grow to such a nostalgia. And especially now too, you're seeing a lot of resurgence with the movies that have been coming out recently. And like
Hmm.
to a novice fan, like would you say, how would you explain the whole GI Joe movement to them?
Oh man, those questions are always tough. You mean just like what's going on right now? Like how there's been a resurgence right now?
Or just basically
Or you just mean,
like why, this fandom is just so sustaining and just so connecting with, like you as a fan, like that you stuck with it all this time.
I think it's just the characters, man. I mean, Larry Hama really built this amazing group of characters and they're so cool. Like every single one of them is uniquely cool in their own way. And then they have the coolest villains. Like Cobra, the Dreadnoks, all that stuff. They're some of the coolest characters. And I think that's really what it comes down to is that like yeah, there's some really great stories in there across the board, where it's the cartoon, the comics, but dude, it's all about those characters. And I think all of us just
Mm.
have fun with those characters. I mean, even with this project, that was one of the biggest pieces, was just like that list of who I could use. Which characters could I use? And my impatience. We talk about this a lot. You were at the panel in New York, so you probably heard
Yeah.
like my impatience with wanting to use everybody. I think it's those characters, man. I think we just really we relate to them in weird ways, but we just have fun with them. But I think it's just because of really that groundwork that Larry Hama made with those characters. I think we all just that's what we kind of gravitate toward. But it's also that like good versus evil, but it's fun when the evil is cool and fun, you know?
Yes.
Like I think that's definitely a piece of it, Robert talked about this a bit of these kind of like it's weird. It's like it's not black and white thinking, but you're like there's a clear good side and a bad side, but then the bad side is very much like a fun bad side,
Mhm.
like you want to root for them in ways like I have a Cobra sweater. I don't have a GI Joe sweater. I have a Cobra sweater. And that was actually a big piece of me coming into the book, was being like, oh, I want to show not just the origin of GI Joe, but I want to show the origin of Cobra, because I found that to be a really interesting thing. But yeah, I think it's just the characters, man. I think it's just the
Well,
characters. I think that's what we all gravitate toward. When you start talking to people, it's funny when you start talking to other people that are fans and stuff. You do talk about your favorite stories, but I think people just start talking about the characters a lot and just how much they love certain character, what characters did or didn't do,
mhm.
what they looked like, and yeah. I mean, as a kid, part of why I loved GI Joe, not only because how colorful it was and fun and the cartoon, but man, those vehicles, like they had the
Yes.
best vehicles of any toy line. I would argue probably the best vehicles of any toy line ever.
I have to agree with you. I mean, if it's not number one, it's top three at least,
Yeah,
at the bare minimum.
yeah. I mean, I feel like maybe Transformers is a cheat if
Yeah,
they consider it into the
exactly.
cars. But you might argue maybe I wasn't a Power Rangers kid. Like Power Rangers, I was aged out by the time Power Rangers is a thing. But you might think of like maybe Ninja Turtles. Ninja Turtles had some cool vehicles, but not like G.I. Joe. I might be wrong. I'm curious if anybody else is going to be like, no, it's number one is this, but I think it's that. But yeah, all that stuff, dude. I think again, it's kind of the characters. I think the characters are so compelling and interesting that that's the stuff that you really, I think, all of us kind of gravitate toward. For me, I don't think I fell out of Transformers because again, I was talking to Skybound for a long time about Transformers. But man, when the classified line started, I was hooked immediately. I was like, I didn't get the first round. I got the second round, and then I was just like buying all of them ever since. So I have all of them here. But I think it's interesting to watch, kind of, at least for me, kind of getting back into it even before I had the job, just because of that. And then, obviously having kids too, like having my son in here, and he like I can see him gravitating toward it. For me, I guess that's where I start to connect with it again a bit.
No, absolutely.
Keeps the
Before we go to the
flame-
next question,
It keeps the
yeah,
flame
Tom.
alive. That's why, it really is. When you can get that, especially because I am a Power Rangers guy. Thank you very much.
Oh, I have a problem with Power Rangers. I was like a little bit older, I think, when it started. Maybe that's why. Yeah.
So was I, but I'm the Voltron kind of kid, so it all segue.
See, that's a blind spot. Voltron has been a blind spot for me my whole life. That's why. But anyway.
On this side of my office that you can't see, I've
Yeah.
got about 40 some odd plus, figures, so it keeps the flame alive. And I think that's what the staying power of a lot of these franchises from the 80s really help, especially with us elder millennials, as as we are, because we do want to get back some of that childhood that, wherever it may have gone. And now that we have grown-up money, let's how do we do it? And then how do we remanifest that grown-up money into grown-up stories?
And especially too, touching back about the cool heels. It's like in pro wrestling, like you always kind of gravitate towards, like we we're talking off air about, like MJF before he went to his face turn as of right now. Yeah. It's just you find yourself rooting for the bad guys, and you want to see them, that's how they slowly convert and win you over. Like arguably my favorite G.I. Joe character is Storm Shadow, but I've always loved that character. Just kind of plays in with that. I mean, it's right up there with like the John Cena of G.I. Joe himself, Duke, and especially going into the series now. What can we talk about issue number 1? I know that's going to be out December 27th. Like we say, you need to make sure you're running to your comic shops and ordering multiple copies. But yeah, what can we talk about that book?
Well, if you've read Transformers 2, then you saw what happened. And we talked a little bit in New York, but I mean, you see in Transformers 2, which when this airs, it'll have been out for a week, but Duke has a run-in with Starscream, and in that moment for Duke, it's like Duke is this person, we kind of established this in the first issue, who's kind of seen it all, right? Like Duke is this military man who has seen it all. Like he has been on the field, he's seen all kinds of crazy stuff. But in that moment, when he sees a jet turn into a robot, it kind of blows his mind. And then obviously because of what else happens in that scene, it's a very traumatic and tragic moment for him. It breaks him in a way, and it makes him start questioning things. And that's really where our book opens, where it's like we do establish, in the first couple of pages of Duke number 1, I really thought about, one of my favorite memories and really early memory of G.I. Joe is that opening, right? Like whenever they did the different openings for different seasons, but they would do that opening, the what do you call it? Just the intro, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, I kind of want to recreate that in a way for Duke, but by himself. Like just have all these cool moments, big shoe-pace, splash of Duke doing something super cool. And then we see that we immediately cut to like, oh, he's kind of broken right now, right? Like he is not the Duke that you're as familiar with. Because I want to show Duke get to that. Like I want to show him get to the point where he is the leader and where he forms this team. I want to show how we get there and the steps that it takes and why it's him. Why is he the one that's supposed to lead this team? Why is he the person that does this? But to do that, we had to break him first. We wanted to show getting built up, so we broke him. And so that's what happened to Starscream. He has this moment. And he doesn't know the difference between a Decepticon and Autobot. All he knows is there was a giant robot. And so for him in that moment, he's like, first, I feel like I'm being lied to. And then he starts asking questions, and they're covering. They're not giving him what he wants to know. And they're pushing back on him. He's like, you're lying to me at this point. And it really does make him start questioning everything. And he has kind of a crisis of faith in that moment. And so we wanted him on this journey of, You know, it's weird. I had a line in the script, and I think we cut it, where I had him talking about revenge. And I was like, because that's kind of where part of his head is in that a little bit, where he's like, I need answers, and I need to
Mhm.
know that I'm not a nut. You know,
Yeah.
I need. It really comes out. I need answers, but also he's like, if I find one of these robots again, I'm taking it down. You know,
Mhm.
like this is something that's going on, and so that's where he's at in the first issue, and that's how we start getting into the story with him, where it's like he's this broken person who's gone through something traumatic and witnessed something very tragic, but he's pissed off, you know, and nothing's going to stop him from getting those answers and getting, you know, again, I hesitate to use the word revenge for someone like Duke. You know, I don't really think Duke is the kind of person that would necessarily want revenge, but I think the idea of he needs to find some kind of justice, you know, and he needs to figure out what this thing is, you know. And that's some of the elements you see in the first issue, is him starting down that path and on that journey to get those answers. And as you see in the first issue, he gets kind of an answer, but it's weird. It's like not the correct answer. But again, he
Mhm.
doesn't know the difference. You know, like
Right.
he in his mind, you know, it's funny because in his mind, he doesn't automatically jump to aliens. Like, why
Mhm.
would you?
Yeah,
You know,
exactly. Like
if
this is
you
brand new.
yeah,
Yeah.
if you saw a truck drive down the street and all of a sudden that truck turned into a robot, your mind would not automatically go, "Oh, that's an alien."
Yeah. It'd be like, wait,
If
what,
you
is a
had those
movie going
kind
on
of
here or something? Yeah.
yeah, but you would probably, if you're a Duke, you'd be like, that's a weapon. Someone built that.
Mhm.
Who built that weapon? And now I have to find who built it. And that's what starts again, takes on this journey of figuring some stuff out. And then obviously he gets himself into some trouble. And then you start seeing, you know, what the solution to him is in that moment. Cause you're kind of like, oh, well, if we're gonna find you know, if we're gonna we have to track Duke down, who's gonna do it? Yeah. So it's all the stuff that went into that first issue.
No, I mean, and like I say, it really sets a high pace for what's going on, because for everything that's been building, like I say, since Void Rivals to Transformers,
Yeah.
and now with this, especially with such a popular fan base. Like, do you think there's any kind of pros and cons about writing these characters? I mean, you're no stranger to writing big characters, you know, with your work with Superman and Batman and Robin. But in like this kind of circumstance, you know, this fan base has been around for decades, is kind of like the take with, you know, comparing to the body of work of other authors that worked on this. Like, was there just a direct approach you wanted to kind of establish, like, this is my run?
Yeah, I mean, because we're starting at the beginning, or we're starting, you know, I don't want to use the word small, you know, but we're starting a little
Hmm.
grounded with it, you know. I mean, that's how we're trying to. I hesitate to use the word ultimate, you know, with Ultimate
Yeah.
Marvel, the way Ultimate Marvel started. That was something we talked about in the beginning. Was like what worked about Ultimate Marvel. Can we find that here with Duke? And that's why we started with Duke, because it would also been
Hmm.
obvious to start with GI Joe. But it's like
Right.
we don't want to start with everything already established. It's like, no, 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 let's start here and show this progression. Let's show the build. And really, again, we talked a lot on the panel in New York, where it's about patience and like letting it breathe. Like let it be about, again, those characters, right? Like every
Yeah.
character introduction has to be something cool, you know. Let's start with that. So that's part of where our motivation was with starting in this way. And but with the fandom, you know, it's tough with fandom of any kind, right? And I'm a
Hmm.
fan of stuff, and I can be real opinionated about things.
Yeah.
So I try to keep that in mind, but at the same time, I just try to approach it with like respect and love. That's it. Because I mean, I really believe that every character is somebody's favorite,
Hmm.
and you
Oh,
don't want to
true.
bury it. You know, we talked about this. We were talking about the wrestling stuff off the air. It's like I don't want to bury anybody in this. Like I know that like there are characters that I love. So we did in New York. We revealed some of the cast members, right, for the books, right. So in Duke,
Right.
you know, we revealed that Baroness and Stalker and Falcon are in it, and that's just a small piece of the amount of characters that are going to be in this. We have a lot more, and once the covers start coming out, you're going to start seeing more and more. And then on the Cobra side, we revealed that it was, you know, Cobra, Commander, Destro, Zarana, and then Mercer. And so I'm going to
Hmm.
rewind here and talk about Mercer for a moment. So Mercer was one of my favorite characters as a kid. And I couldn't even really tell you why at one point. I think it was just because that dude had like the anti-Cobra thing. The idea that he was Cobra and then defected over, like all that stuff,
Yeah.
dude, was so cool. Like such a cool character that when we started talking about these books, I was like, the fan in me was like, I gotta find a home for Mercer. Like immediately. I gotta find a home for Mercer. The reason why I tell you that is because again, I recognize that for every character here, there's somebody out there that is like, that is my favorite.
Hmm.
You know, and so I just try to keep that in my mind when I'm working on this stuff, is like, you know, being respectful and really respecting the core. So one of the things I have is I have a Rolodex of all the cards, right? Like the original Larry Hama written cards. And so what I do with that is I use that as like that is the core, right? Like if I'm thinking about a character, anything about them, you know what I go do? I read that card first. Because like there's a lot that's happened since those cards, obviously, right? Like there's a
Oh
lot
yeah,
of
yeah.
story, whether it's in the cartoons, whether it's in the comic books, there's a lot of story there, right? But to me, when I go back and look at those cards, that's the core of who that person is, right? That's the origin point, that's the big bang for that character. And so I go back and look through that, and that's to me the stuff that I just try to keep in mind when I'm working on this. So I hope that when the fandom is coming in, it's like it's not going to be exactly like Devil's Due or IDW books. And there are books in both of those. I mean, I was buying the one that was Devil's Due one like a maniac. I'm friends with
Mhm.
Tim Seeley, and I talked to Tim Seeley about this when I got the job and stuff. But like I remember when Mike Costa was doing the Cobra book, and it's like I try to look at these pieces and be like, okay, I can't. It's always tough. This is true of any comic book when you're working on a big franchise. You cannot repeat what has already happened, right? You
Right.
got to take it somewhere new. You have to. You got to do something different with it. Otherwise, that's always the balancing act because you will get people accusing you of like, oh, they're repeating history or they're doing something that's too different. And so it's a line you got to walk. But at the end of the day, I have to. It's this is the hard part of the job. It's like you put all these pieces on the table, but at the same time, I'm the one that then has to play with it. Like I'm the one that has to make those decisions because one of my rules of comics of any book I'm working on is that I have to like it. If I don't like it, then I messed up.
Yeah.
And so I can
No,
play
it's
with all these toys, and I can put all these factors in. I can think about the fandom. I can think about all these things. And I do, it's funny, like, because I am a fan, like I will go and watch YouTubes talking about the toys or just the franchise in general. And so it's interesting to kind of
mhm.
get that perspective. But at the same time, I have to like, it's almost like I have to erase everything and just think about what's best for the story and just put my heart into it and try. Because I think when someone reads it, they can tell if you don't care,
Right.
and that's really the major thing. I would hope people when they read, they can tell I care. And that's it. That's all you can do. You got to think about, it's tough. And again, I've worked on the Flash and Superman and Batman and Robin, done a lot of stuff that have, obviously huge fandoms. And
Mhm.
yeah, you can think about it, but at the end of the day, you got to just be like, what would I enjoy?
No, absolutely. I mean, you can definitely tell as somebody that buys your work all the time. Yeah, you can definitely tell how much emotion and heart you put into it, and especially with the classic characters, like giving that energy into them. Like, like not to get sidetracked, but I love your Superman right now that you're doing with
Oh,
Jamal
thanks.
Campbell. I think it's like one of the best Superman runs I've read in recent memory. But you can just tell the emotion pouring into it, and you can see that coming into this universe too, because especially with such the big fandom involved, that you want people to really connect with it and be inspired. Like when we were all growing up, to like, this is the passion I feel when I read these books. And like, I'm so getting entrenched with these stories that,
Yeah.
now with everything coming up, in the, after this series, I don't know how much we can talk about,
Yeah,
but
sure.
just even the groundwork, like, what kind of direction do you want with this universe after this series is done?
It's hard to talk about. Like we have a lot of
That's
plans.
fair.
I guess that's the most we could say. I mean, Robert. Robert's a planner,
Yeah.
and you can see by everything that's going on that it's like, there are some things that you could probably guess that are obvious, but at the same time, what we've seen is we do want to surprise you. We want you to know this is not going to be as predictable. I mean, you saw this already with the fact that Void Rivals had Jetfire in it. It's
Yeah.
like that was unpredictable. Obviously, if you've been reading, what Daniel's doing in Transformers, you saw in issue 1 where he killed Bumblebee like immediately.
Yeah.
It's like these are all moves to be like, oh, you think you don't,
Mhm.
and trying to play with those expectations with these books. And so, like I said, there's things you could probably guess that we're gonna do, but there's obviously gonna be some huge twists and turns there, and that's the most I probably could say. But I have a lot of thoughts on these characters and what I want to do, and again, like I always talk about this, but like the patience that I've had to learn working on this because I'm like, it's funny, like Firefly was in Duke #1. This was a good example. So I love Firefly. So Firefly was in Duke #1, and we took him out because it was like a drive-by cameo. You know what I mean? Like it was one of those
Gotcha.
things that I've used before, like, oh, he was standing in the background kind of. He had like a line of dialogue, and I'm like, nah, man, like that's too cool a character for that. And so we moved him out. But then it's like at the same time, I'm like, I'm always looking for that opportunity to use Firefly, and that's true of like a lot of the characters. One of the things I did with the book, I really took a break and I tried to focus on only the first few years worth of stuff that was being revealed, either the toys or the comics. I try not to go too big too quick, even though characters I might want. I cheated on the
Mm.
Mercer thing by bringing him in early, but again, that was just a fan of me.
I was
Like,
gonna say he was
because
one
he
of
has such a cool
Sergeant
backstory.
Slaughter's commander. It was way later, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, the thing with him is that, like, I think because his backstory is that he was in Cobra, it made sense to have him be around. You know, like, but we show him there, we don't bring him over here.
No, and especially too, it's just having that fandom and having that energy. I mean, that's the one thing that is me as a reader. You can pick up any of these books, Void Rivals, Transformers, and obviously I'm running to my LCS and making sure my order is like double checked. Like we have copies coming in for what you have coming out. I mean, it's just such an exciting time to be a fan with this. I mean, this is just the perfect universe to sneak in. It just really caught everybody by surprise. But the fan response to me, how do you describe that?
Oh man, it's awesome. I mean, I think I think people are just looking for something. It's weird. They're looking for comfort food, but also new at the same time, right?
Mhm.
Like you're looking for something new, you're looking for something fun. And that's one of the priorities for me is like make sure these books are fun, like you enjoy it and you have a fun time with it. So those are all the pieces that people are looking for. And I think that right now is this moment where it came in like a wrecking ball, and it came in fast. There wasn't a lot of I think one of the mistakes sometimes we see is that things get announced too early.
Yeah.
Like too early and then you burn out. And then the conversation gets to be too big and you got to move faster. And I think that's something with this, the fact that we were able to move so quickly to be like,
Mm.
boom, here's Void Rival, boom, here's Transformers, boom, here's Duke, and then immediately after Duke, 1 month later, here's Cobra Commander, right? Like the fact
Right.
that we're able to move quickly and capitalize on that excitement, but it's been awesome to watch, like go into the different panels, even, going to signings and stuff and just seeing that excitement for it's great because we're excited. Like that's always
Yeah.
the best when we're excited, and then because it's a bummer when you're excited, nobody cares.
Right.
But
Right.
we're
Right.
excited, and then you can tell that people really care right now. Yeah, it's awesome, and I'm hoping that we're doing stuff that people will enjoy, or at least give it a minute, like
Yeah.
give it a minute to like see what we're doing, and come into it.
Yeah. Tom, you had a question there?
So you were saying earlier about the whole timing of things, of how things are coming out just at the right moment, just now, and even earlier when you were doing things in development. I gotta say, this lined up, in my opinion, perfectly with that, end credit scene from Rise of the Beast. Is that like right when the
Total
licensing came out
coincidence.
to you? Just total coincidence.
Total coincidence.
Okay.
Total coincidence. Yeah, total coincidence. I mean, Robert's talked about this before, so I'm not like talking out of turn. It was a happy coincidence,
Very.
you know.
Yeah.
I remember when they told me I can't remember what it was. I think Robert and Sean have talked about this. That basically somebody at Hasbro or somebody kind of told them like a little early on, everybody's secretive, and that's okay. I like secrets too. But you could tell somebody was like, "Hey, you're kind of close. Just letting you know." And when I heard when I heard about it, I was like, "Oh, that's awesome. That's great." And then part of me was like, "Oh man, we're doing the same thing." So it is interesting how these things kind of, but you can tell it's in the zeitgeist. I think it was just the timing. Like I think it to me that says it was just the right time, right? We just happened to catch it right at the right moment. Our heads were in the right place, and you could tell the work that Robert and Sean and Skybound have done to really like take care of these properties and
Yeah.
put a lot of thought into it. I mean, we've definitely put a lot of thought into the plan for this, and it was just, yeah, man, just total coincidence, but a happy coincidence.
Now, since we
Well,
also have wrestling fans here and
Mhm.
Joe fans, I'm gonna ask. Let me tell you, is he gonna show up in there? With the big old glasses? Can
I
can
don't
we?
know yet. I don't know yet. Yes. I
Obviously,
don't
if you're
know. I don't
talking
know when.
Mercer,
Yeah,
so
yeah. I don't know
at
when.
some
I don't
point.
know when. I was just thinking about this. We were just talking about this maybe 2 weeks ago. Yes, I just don't know when.
Okay.
I just
Fair
don't
enough.
know when. We were talking about it. I just don't know for sure when. I have some thoughts on it. Like I have thoughts on every single one of the characters, how you introduce them, but it's gonna depend on some things. Without getting into spoiler stuff, yeah, I have thoughts in my head of how I want to do it. It just depends on a lot of factors.
and I'm going to put out there just in case, because I was kind of doing a little history of, if you need to make an original Joe, just putting it out there, okay? There
Oh,
has
dude, listen, I originally had a new Joe character. It's funny because yeah, I had figured out a new Joe character. I wrote their whole thing, and they were gonna be in the book, and then we just ran out of room for it, like these first
Oh,
few issues. So it will happen. Like it will happen. I mean, it's just funny because yes, I would like to do that. You know, I want to introduce some new characters too, and then obviously, as a nerd that I am, I want them to make classified toys of those new characters.
the toyetic
But there's
urge.
so
Yeah.
many. Oh yeah, toyetic. Yeah, dude, I love that phrase. There are so many characters, so many
Oh yeah, so many
characters
characters, but
that
there's
it's
never
like,
been a CB.
dude,
Just saying, there's never been a CB.
oh, I'm writing this down.
Oh, go
That's
for
really
it, man.
yeah. Like we talk about all this stuff, dude. I mean, it's been fun. I mean, we start in a fun place, and then it becomes work, but it's still good.
No, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot to be excited about with this universe. Before we let you go, though, I said we were going to sneak in a wrestling question. This is a two-parter because the first part will play into the second.
Okay.
What is your favorite wrestling faction of all time?
Oh, dude, that's tough. Okay. Oh man. Oh man.
This is the part where I just go blank stare. I have
Yeah.
no idea what we're talking about.
Oh, dude. That's real hard. I feel like I'm gonna age myself possibly because I liked NWO and I like DX.
I know
I
those.
feel like that moment is such a great moment in wrestling, and I'm not sure if many other factions. I mean, you get like the Four Horsemen and stuff like that,
Mhm.
and obviously
Yeah.
there are things that I'm like I nerd for. Like I like the Chris Jericho Appreciation Society as a thing because I just love Chris Jericho. So I'm like there are bits
Right,
and
right.
pieces of stuff that I'm like that's really cool. That was really cool faction. When you get like the Ministry and stuff like that, it's like yeah, but dude, I think here's the thing I will say to you, and I guess this is the answer because I'm sure you know this in wrestling that like the way that the WWE really evaluates if someone is over or not is their T-shirt sales, right? You've
Right.
heard this before? Yes.
Yep.
I've only owned a DX shirt and an NWO shirt, so I guess that's the answer.
Okay.
Like those are the two. I've never owned shirts for any other. I've owned shirts for other wrestlers for sure, but I think those are the only two factions I ever owned shirts for.
So with that said,
Yeah,
if you
bring it
were
on.
going to form your own NWO of the G.I. Joe universe, who are your three that you start with?
Well, here's the question I have with you though. With this, is the NWO?
Okay.
They were villains.
Well, that's what I say. You could, well, I mean, they kind of went through that cool heel phase too. So, I mean, you can kind of
Yeah.
mix it up how you want.
Man, that's tough, dude. Who would I bring over? I actually don't think I can answer this because, and this is why I wanted to say this. There's something I'm working on right now with G.I. Joe that is essentially what we're talking about, like an NWO.
Okay.
So I can't. I'm literally like in the process of trying to figure it out right now. So I feel like if I start answering, I'm gonna give stuff away.
Okay. Then I can flip it to one other question. I don't think
Yeah.
it's
Sorry.
we
Yeah.
throw.
Go ahead.
No. By all means, I don't want to ruin anything because I want to sit there
Yeah.
and be surprised when everything
I
comes
think about
out.
the NWO probably too much because I think the NWO is a fascinating moment in time for wrestling, and I love interviews, and there's a lot to be learned in the form of entertainment and company rivalries, all that when it comes to NWO. So I think with the NWO a lot, and so that idea of like who would be the NWO is for GI Joe is fascinating. I just don't think I should answer it right now.
No, perfectly fine. I'm good with that. But
Yeah.
I had a backup one just in
Yeah, go
case,
for it.
and
Yeah,
I think you can answer this one. All right. Obviously, Roman Reigns, greatest champion we've had in pro wrestling past 40 years, we'll say. Obviously, who would you choose as a GI Joe to face him and beat him for the title at WrestleMania?
Dude, that's tough. Okay, so I'm trying to think of like who. Okay, here's the trick with that because whoever. See, all right. Here's the challenge with that because whoever you give it to, you want to make sure they get put over, right?
Mhm.
So this is the debate I have of like with Brock Lesnar being the Undertaker, right? Like, yes, it made sense that it was Brock that did it, but at the same time, Brock didn't need it,
Right.
right?
No, I
So it's a
agree with you
weird
with
math.
that.
It's a weird math. So with Roman Reigns, because what's he on right now? Is it like day 600 or some crazy thing? Like
No,
it's
he's
sort
over
of.
1,000. Yeah, he's
Is
over
it
a
really?
thousand.
It's been three. It's over 3 years. Okay. I'm
Yep.
torn on this because yeah, I'm really torn on this one, dude. Like, because who needs to put over? So like, I haven't watched enough recently to be totally up on LA Knight and everything. Is it? It's
Okay.
LA Knight. He just
Yep.
lost it. He just lost like a week ago.
Yes.
Man, who do I want though? Oh, you know what? At this point, I'm gonna say MJF. I wanted Cody to do it, but I was legitimately pissed off when Cody didn't win at WrestleMania this year. I legitimately was angry. I stood up and walked out of my house for a moment and just stood outside. I was legitimately angry when Cody didn't do it because, but the tough thing is I want it to be, who do you put over, and is it a surprise? And I want to be a
Right.
surprise. And the problem with Cody in that moment was, and I took that one personal. So the problem with Cody in that moment was he everyone thought he was going to win, which meant he shouldn't win, and that's tough.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna, dang dude, that's a really. I'm just gonna say MJF because I like MJF, and I think if he comes over, that'll be interesting. I'm not sure who else it could be because I mean, at that point, you know what it'll end up happening? It'll be The Rock or something. Like that's what's gonna happen, and it's gonna be the same thing where it's like The Rock doesn't need it, but you're like, okay, I guess that makes sense. And then it becomes a matter of who beats The Rock. I mean, you know how the wrestling math is, right? Because then it's like,
Oh yeah, no,
beat
completely.
The
It's
Rock, yeah,
it's wide open right now because like with WWE, there's three that could do it logistically: Cody
yeah.
Rhodes, LA
Yeah.
Knight, and Jey Uso. If you have not been following lately, has now
No, no,
got
no.
himself in
I
that
understand that.
conversation.
Well, I guess you look at like Sami Zayn, but Sami Zayn's injured right now. Him and Kevin Owens are injured right now, right?
Oh no,
Are
no,
they?
they both are back.
They're
They're
both
both back
back.
now.
Okay.
They got split up though. Kevin's now on SmackDown because of Jey Uso.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I mean, the fandom part of me wanted to. I feel like we do need to have some kind of like Sami Zayn, Roman Reigns confrontation. You know, like a real one.
Hmm.
Um, some contour on that. But yeah, I feel like that's a tough one, dude. That's a tough one. I mean, I think the Cody stuff, personally, I think that would be great to do at this next full WrestleMania because it'll be
Yep.
the one. I guess it would depend on if Cody won. Did Cody win a Royal Rumble last year?
Yes, he did.
He did. All right. Yeah. I'm always a little weird when I don't like when history repeats itself that tight, where it's like immediately the same month later. You know?
I'm gonna put it out there. I just want Roadblock to win if he ever was able to wrestle. He's
Yeah.
one of my favorites. I absolutely love Roadblock because you know he's a chef too. Look, I have
Well, that's what
very
I said.
odd reasons why I love my Joes. Okay, just go with me.
Okay, but yeah, for GI Joe, who was GI Joe that beat him?
Yes. Who's the Joe? Yeah. Who's the
Yeah.
GI
Sorry. Get
Joe to
back to the
beat?
original question.
No,
If it
no.
was a
By all
GI
means, I don't mind
Joe,
talking. You know me. I don't mind talking wrestling. We can do it all day.
yeah. I mean, who's the GI Joe that I think needs to be put over? Oh man, I'm gonna throw you a curveball. I'm gonna throw you a curveball.
Okay.
Falcon. Falcon.
Ooh.
Ooh,
Think about it. Think about it. Like the story you could tell with that. I think that would be the person to do it because that's the person who you put over. Because I don't know if they put him over good enough in the movie, But yeah, I'll go with Falcon. I think Falcon would be interesting because there's the obvious stuff, right? Because you don't need to put over Snake Eyes.
Right.
Duke, you don't necessarily need to put over Duke. You don't need to put over Flint. I'm trying to think of who's the next generation because that's really the answer, right? Like that is logistically the answer of what it should be with Roman Reigns is like who do you think is the like I think it was a mistake to have LA Knight wrestle him last week. I think they should have waited.
The thing with that is I think they made the right call because you have to think he's never had a singles title his entire run of NXT and WWE.
Yeah.
So you can't have him win to go over. But what I think they're doing is they're setting him up to see how the crowd was going to react after he lost. And then he's either going to be the guy to take it from Gunther, who's been Intercontinental Champion. He
For a
broke
long time. Yeah.
he broke the record. And
Yeah.
Logan Paul, who just beat Rey Mysterio for the US title. Like he'll be the next mid-card champion, whoever it's going to be.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about when you get to like Hulk Hogan Ultimate Warrior, where it was like champion versus Intercontinental Champion. I feel like that's
Yeah.
sort of it
I
needs to
remember
be
that. I was
kind
there
of
for
get
that one.
Yeah, see, now we're getting to that time period where everyone was watching wrestling. We're all kids watching wrestling. Yeah, I feel like that's sort of where you have to start with is you got to find people who need to get put over who are next generation. So I'm trying to think of like, who do you put in that next generation? It's really funny. I mean, you get someone like Chuckles because I've learned everyone loves Chuckles. That's what I've learned the last few months. Like everybody loves
Oh,
Chuckles. Um, I actually got
with the
that shirt
shirt
as a
there.
toy. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like if I threw a curveball out, it'd be funny if someone like Sergeant Slaughter. Because if you get Sergeant Slaughter, like, Sergeant Slaughter from the cartoon, from, that's like young Sergeant Slaughter, and he comes in, versus, because you couldn't have Sergeant Slaughter now. Like, that wouldn't happen.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know, I think that would be interesting. Yeah, I think it has to be somebody that's part of a next generation of people that are going to do it. I mean, they built it up. I mean, that is, I guess, that is probably the modern equivalent of the Undertaker's streak is Roman Reigns right now, right?
Yeah.
Like that is probably the closest we have to that. Because if there is anybody else that has that level of like not been beaten, feeling like an impossible opponent, the way they built Roman Reigns up.
Yeah, the work they've done with the whole
yeah.
bloodline storyline has just been amazing, and like the
So-
fact they're still extending it is mind blowing to me. Even though I think it's all going to finally end at next year's WrestleMania.
So last year before Royal Rumble last year, I was behind. I kept hearing about this, you know, the bloodline stuff with Sami Zayn and everything, and feeling Usi, you know. So I went and I watched, like, dude, WWE super smart. They know that people on YouTube will watch like recaps and stuff, right?
Mhm.
They
Yep.
put out like a 40-minute. They put out a 40-minute recap before Royal Rumble, and I watched that, and I was like, yeah, this is easily one of the best storylines they've had forever. Is this? And man, the heat behind it, like
Yeah.
everything going in, you could tell like the stuff going into Royal Rumble, the stuff going to WrestleMania. I mean, you watched that WrestleMania that first night when it was the Kevin Owens, Sami Zayn versus the brothers. Dude, that
Yeah.
crowd, I haven't seen a crowd pop and be that hot in a long time. Like they were losing their minds during that match, and so you could tell they put a lot of thought into it. But to bring it back to G.I. Joe, we are putting equal amount of thought and care into these books, you know, into Duke, into Cobra Commander, and all the plans we have. So yeah, look, we have we're trying to make sure we put that same level of care and love that you can tell they were putting into that storyline over there.
Yeah, and like we say, we can't emphasize enough. Make sure you run down to your local comic shops or wherever you're buying your comics. Make sure you get multiple copies of this book before the final order cutoff date, because you don't want to miss out on this. I guarantee it's going to sell out. This is going to be something special. And like I say, when this drops in the comic shops on December 27th, it is going to be the buzz of the day. There's no doubt in my mind about it. You know, as one Mr. Paul Heyman says, that's not a prediction, that's a spoiler. So you want to make sure that you have this book ordered and locked up. And if you need more information to find it, in the liner notes of this podcast episode, we have the comic shop locator in there as well. We'll have the direct link, and we'll also put in the link for Joshua's Substack, which everybody should be checking out as well. Josh, thank you for taking the time out to talk with us today. It's been a blast. We definitely got to do it again sometime.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you guys so much.
For Tom, thank you for joining me on this episode, and let people know where to find you.
You can find me everywhere and anywhere. I know Ken's got it in the liner notes. You can always see me every single Tuesday night, 8 p.m. right on Nerd Initiative's Turn a Page.
And for anything and everything that is the ODPH, you can find it at odphpodcast.com and also nerdinitiative.com every single Wednesday starting at 9 a.m. for New Comic Book Day. We have your coverage all set there, and you definitely want to make sure you pick this book up. This has been a special edition of the ODPH podcast, better known as the Ocho Duro Parlay Hour. We'll see you next time.